that specific reason is actually why when you're editing, first of a series is standalone, it's really not that different. The only difference is those extra add-ons because it needs to be solid on its own, or you will never get the sale for the rest of the series.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writing Roundtables Revising a Novel. I am so excited to dive into this topic with you today. There is a lot to cover. Editing is hard, but we're going to try to make it a little bit easier or at least a little bit less confusing for you. Before we dive into the panel, there's just a little bit of housekeeping I want to do. First up, this event is hosted by Weeknight Writers, a community organization devoted to providing accessible support for authors. We do a lot of community stuff, a lot of educational stuff. You can check us out at weeknightwriters.com. We have a variety of free and paid programming and a premium membership where you can access all kinds of year-round support, including nightly accountability check-ins, weekly write-ins, and much, much more. So do check that out. And the other thing I want to say is that this panel is being recorded. We ask that all non-panelists keep yourselves muted and keep your video turned off for the duration of the session. If you have questions, you can ask them in the text chat, and our lovely intern, Monique, will make sure that your questions are seen. Please just put question at the beginning so that we know that's what the message is, because sometimes we can get pretty chatty in the text and it's good to be able to quickly sort through things. All right, with that out of the way, I am going to dive into introducing our lovely panelists, or more accurately, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself with your name, pronouns, a little bit about what you write, and what your overall editing style is. And we will start with C.
Which one? Me or CL
Which
Poke?
one? Don't start with me. I'm trying to find my notes and I can't find them.
Okay, so we'll start with Chelsea.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Chelsea, better known as CM Lockhart. I write books about Black girls who aren't all that nice. I have 2 books of my fantasy trilogy out in the world. We Are the Origin and We Are Dying Gods. These 2 back here. I've also written an anthology called Magic of the Melanin, where I was a contributing editor. And I have a new series called The Lady Widow. The first book is out in the world. Second book comes out May 26th. So I'm super excited about that. And the second part of the question was editing style, correct? Yeah. My editing style, I'm a developmental editor. So I'm more so big picture. I'm more so, does this answer the questions? Does this deliver on the promise of the genre and the story that you bring to the table? So my style is very, I don't say communicative, like, what is your goal and are we reaching it? That's kind of how I tackle things.
Awesome. Jade?
I am Jade. My pronouns are she, her. I thought they were up there, but they apparently are not. I mainly write epic fantasy, but my editing style is rather eclectic. I've been editing for 15 years, so I've pulled things from many different areas. And I am a developmental editor, but I do tend to work more in coaching at the moment. So we do developmental editing, but instead of returning the usual chunk of, the with the questions and whatever, I tend to do more coaching sessions based around developmental editing questions.
Awesome. Jade is also my editor for a lot of my stuff, and she's great. So shout out to Jade.
Thank you.
Vanessa.
Hello, I'm Vanessa Ricci Theodore Ness. My pronouns are she, they. I write primarily fantasy, mostly queer stuff with dragon riders. It's lots of fun. I'm the first self-published author to win a Nebula Award for my middle grade book, The Young Necromancer's Guide to Ghosts. My editing style is in process all the time, but for the most part, because I used to be an editor in a past life, I edited for 10 years. I did developmental and copy editing. I tend to go in what the industry standard is of, starting big picture and working your way down to more granular stuff. And when I'm editing at the big picture level, I usually go several passes, working on character now and tweaking voice, and that's just not always in the same order. Usually I leave notes for myself as I'm going. I'm a big bracket note person. Um, those are so helpful. But yeah, just dealing with all of that stuff, uh, and just sort of going along as just wherever it needs. Like every book needs something different, and so that's why my process is a little different every book.
Sounds great. And yet those bracket notes are great, but also sometimes a curse because you get back to it and you're like, wow, past me really just left like a minefield here for future me.
300 bracket notes in one of my first drafts. It was a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of them were just like name because you get a side character and you're like, shit, what do I do? Oh, sorry, am I allowed to swear? Oh no.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, so it's like I don't know what to name this person because they just popped out of sometimes, my main characters all have names, but like there's like a side character. I'm like, oh, Bob, I can't name everybody Bob. So it's just like name one, name two, name three. And I got to go through and figure out names for them later. Like I'm not slowing down my drafting process to come up with a name for this guy who's only going to show up twice.
Yeah, I feel that. All right, CL, we are circling back to you.
I'm ready. Okay, hi, I'm CL Polk. I usually write fantasy novels. And I mean, I feel like my experience is limited because I've only done self-editing. I've never worked as a developmental editor for anyone. But I do enjoy having a system and a structure. And I'm not going to say I threw it out the window, but it's changing a lot because I've decided that I want to re-examine what I'm doing for editing. And then I also am designing kind of like an editing guide template to go into my Scrivener novel writing template. So it's in a bit of flux. I'm a big Scrivener nerd. And I like to do my editing actually inside Scrivener if I can. Um, I I feel like I'm going to be super vague and maybe a little bit loosey-goosey, but I do believe that revision and editing skills are like the real meat of becoming a better writer.
Awesome, and absolutely agreed. All right, and I am your host, Diana Gunn. I write fantasy and horror, and I also, of course, run Weeknight Writers. So I will plug that again instead of plugging my books. Just go check us out. We've got cool stuff. So, our first question, most resources that are talking about editing break it down into three different stages: developmental edits, line edits, and proofreading. Can you share how you define these stages of editing and or if you break down editing stages in a different way? And this time, let's start with Jade.
Okay. I would say that roughly I do break them down in the same way, but I might think of them slightly differently. Like developmental obviously is your global that the changes at the developmental level affect the entire manuscript. So they usually get done first. There's no sense doing something like copy editing before you've changed all the scenes that you want to change and make sure all the characters are in there that you want to have in there. Um, Style and line editing comes next. This is done at the scene level. Um, I think different people concentrate on this particular type of editing very differently. I will say this is not my strength. I have worked both as a copy editor and a developmental editor. Line editing is where I'm kind of iffy. For my own novels, that's where I would hire someone myself, like for my own work. But so you have your developmental, your style editing, and then mechanical. And this, like some people split this into proofreading and copy editing. Essentially, you're kind of looking at the same thing in my mind. Some people might think about it differently, but that kind of works at the word level. So you're looking at like your grammar and does this read properly as opposed to the actual content of the story. Um, did that fully answer the question or was there more?
Yeah, that's great. Vanessa?
Okay, yeah. So very similar to Jade, big picture stuff in the developmental stylistic edit, which, doesn't make sense if it doesn't come first. I've had a lot of arguments with people who are like, no, no, you have to copy edit first. And I'm like, How much copy editing do you want to do? Because you're going to add scenes and chapters, and then you're going to have to go back and copy edit it again. And the thing about copy editing is it's not just, okay, nerd editor hat coming on here. It's not just fixing the grammar. It's enforcing style, which is making sure you're using things consistently through the whole manuscript. And that, so if you add a chapter and you've spelled things completely differently to the rest of the book and you want to change it so that it all matches that chapter, you've got a lot of work on your hands. You just made more work for yourself because you edited the whole thing and now you got to edit the whole thing again. So yeah, I don't know where the advice of copy editing first is coming from, but like, no. So anyway, I do big picture stuff first. And then yeah, into the line edits where I'm thinking more like, does this make sense? As opposed to, is the grammar correct? And also grammar correct is such a minefield.
Oh,
Again,
that's a whole different conversation.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so I know people use copy editing and proofreading interchangeably, but if you're working with a professional editor, know that there is a difference at the like, especially traditionally published level. Copy editing is the enforcing style and grammar and all of that, spelling, and proofreading is literally checking the proof pages. So some people are just proofreaders, and if you're looking for copy editing and try to hire a proofreader, you're not going to get what you want. I'm going to drop a link in the chat for Editors Canada because they actually define all of this, and it's, you know, it's pretty industry standard at this point that when you're working with like high-level professional editors, this is, and especially again in-house trad, this is sort of what they're working with. And this is sort of because I was a member and like I did a lot of editing for a long time, this is sort of what my framework definition of the editing levels is.
The academic definition.
Yeah, the academics of it.
Excellent. And yeah, I don't know why you would copy edit first. I mean, if you have like a really, really messy first draft, you might want to do just like a quick readability edit first. But yeah, copy editing is definitely later down the line. CL.
Okay, so I usually break this like, okay, I'm gonna start with a confession, and that is while I'm drafting, I edit. Now when I say that, it's just usually like I'm going back a scene or two scenes and I'm reading and I'm allowing myself to maybe do a little bit of line editing. Because I feel like it helps me later because if I take that time to get reacquainted with what I've done so far and how it feels to be in the story at this point, it's going to help me with line editing and style editing later. But once I'm done the draft, the very first thing that I do is I need to revise for structure, character arcs, continuity, and then I do editing that concentrates on the prose itself. This is again another character refining stage, and I really want to lean on that a little bit more heavily later. And proofreading, I am not good at proofreading. My eyes, like I am the most forgiving reader. I don't like some people will be like, I got a typo on the first page. I'm like, I didn't see it. I just automatically kind of converted that spelling to what it was correct because I knew what you meant and I'm moving on with my life. So I am not good at proofreading. Other people have to do this for me.
That is very fair, and it is very important to understand your strengths and when you need help. Chelsea, your thoughts on the stages of editing?
Um, I'm going to say that I basically agree with everything that has been said of like how I look at it, big picture versus style versus, cleaning it up, polishing it up in the proofread stage. And I'm going to say that I also agree with CL Polk and that I am heavy on the editing as I draft, mostly because I don't know if it's weird or not, can't put myself in a category, but I'm just kind of like, I look at it kind of like when you cook. It's like you layer in your seasonings. And so when I'm writing, I'm like, oh, this is great. But then I'll come back to it the next day. I was like, what was I thinking at 2 a.m.? This is unreadable. So I'll go in and do a little bit of editing to keep it consistent. And I'm also one of those people where I'm not a fast drafter in that sense. So I'm like, if I get to the end of a draft, I need it to essentially be what it's going to be. Like there are going to be changes, of course, but it's not like, oh, we should do a whole completely different journey that changes in like the second chapter. Now I have to rewrite the whole thing. So I'm more of an edit as I go type person. And I tend to lean more heavily in the developmental side of it, especially when I'm going along. But then once I have something workable, that's when it's like, oh, style changes. Does this make sense? And is this readable? Would I show this to someone who doesn't live in my house? And then, kind of go from there.
Awesome. So we already touched a little bit on what each of your editing processes look like. Now, my second question is, do you use and or have you tried some of the established methods like reverse outlining or story grid or, any of those sort of set frameworks that exist, or do you kind of just do your own thing and go with what feels right in the moment? And this time, let's start with CL.
Okay. So I have attempted to do the reverse outline, and when I say that, I mean like the point form outline. And I don't really feel like I'm capable of staying out of the weeds doing that way because I want to get granular with the detail. And it's like I also want to finish the task, and these two things are not compatible with each other. I do something very similar to the story grid style, but it's really pared down. And right now I'm actually kind of developing a little bit more complexity into it because what I'm wanting to do is I want to put some things into Scrivener because I realized that with custom metadata and labeling, I could, and that it would probably help me shave some time off of the original reverse outline stages. I actually wrote down my reverse outline process years ago. I put it on my blog. I'm putting the link in the chat so that you can see. It's just basically I just built a table and I write things in it. Um, the thing that I really want to do when I'm doing these story assessments, no matter what method you would use, is I'm trying to check that my character arcs and the event plots fuse together. Like that plot events happen because of character action, and those plot events cause character action. Um, and I'm also trying to make sure that I am demonstrating clearly the character and how, when you're at this point of the story, how would it change if a different character had the deciding action that moved the rest of the story? And I want to make sure that those things are distinct. I kind of want, not like it would be a disaster if this other person had made the decision, but to make it so that people would be like, oh, if we had gone with what Grace decided, this would be a very, very different story. That sort of a thing. I want to make sure that those paths not taken are there for anybody who wants to speculate on them.
I love that. Chelsea.
I was hoping I could go last, but I would say I would say that my editing process is I liken it to running through a dungeon and making a map as I go along. Um, it's kind of like, okay, I have a big picture. I understand what the goal is, but getting there can look very different depending on how things play out in the story. And there are times where sometimes you just have to write it and you have to figure it out. And then you kind of have to see the dead end and be like, you know what? This doesn't work. But that is, I think, kind of the beauty of kind of being able to play with your characters, play with your story, play with what's happening. And I've tried the reverse outline. My brain doesn't work that way because I'm just kind of like, wait, what? And it's just like, I know where we need to go, but I need to see how we get there. And so for me, like I said, running through the dungeon, it's kind of like, okay, if we take this turn, where are we going to go? If we take that turn, where are we going to go? And making sure that kind of like CL said, it kind of builds off of each other and you're creating ultimately this map to the story where it's like it has to go this way. If you take a different left, if you take a different turn, if you follow someone else's plan, you're going to have a completely different story, and making sure that at the end of the day, it's like it had to be this way, and not just with the decisions that they're making, but with the characters that show up, right? So making sure that, hey, if character A never meets character B, that completely changes everything, right? Kind of like the ripple effect in pretty much everything, right? And just making sure that if you take out character B, the story should not stay the same. So making sure that everything has weight, everything is important. Um, and I'm, as a writer, I'm a discovery writer. So trying to make outlines and things, I envy people who can do that. But then I'm just kind of like, I don't know how. Explain it to me. I would love to be able to do that. But kind of like what I said earlier, once you have the full thing, right? You've gotten to the end of the story. I think it's a lot easier to kind of be like, oh, well, what if we did this and what if we did that, and kind of playing with the what if scenarios until you're at the point where you're like, oh, this works because X, Y, and Z, and everything is interconnected the way that I want it to be, especially when you start talking about like series and things and having parts that are still open, and have making sure that you closed off certain plot lines and arc lines so that each book feels like it's full and complete. So just making sure you're meeting the goal of the first thing before moving on. So again, the dungeon reference, making sure you cleared the first level before you start going down the stairs to the next one. Don't know if that made sense to anyone but me, but like hopefully it did.
That made perfect sense to me. I do outline more and more all the time, but I still find there is some aspect of the discovery. There really are for me certain things that I never quite know how exactly they're going to play out until I'm writing them, and usually they're not things that make a huge difference that like change the course of the entire story from what I expected, but they are, changes that will like modify one character's trajectory just a little bit. And so, yeah, I love the analogy of running through a dungeon and mapping it out as you go. All right, Vanessa.
I don't use any of those things. I don't even know what they are. I just checked out C's link to the guide to reverse outline, and that looks terrifying. I'm glad it works for some people, but I don't know, maybe you saw the horror on my face while everybody else was talking. I'm also terrible with spreadsheets. I just do everything in Microsoft Word, and my outlines are like point form. It's like chapter heading, and here's all the notes of what's going to happen. I do outline very, very extensively. So I don't end up making a lot of developmental changes once I've actually gotten to the point of drafting, because I do all of the work up front with the outlining, and I do a lot of that noodling of, oh, what happens if we do this instead of that, and where does this take the story? And so I guess I pre-edit in the outline stage. But yeah, there's always stuff. There's like sometimes I'm like, it's not going to need that. I'm not going to put that in. And then you get through and you've written the whole thing, and it's like, no, it does need that chapter after all. And so, then it goes in. But yeah, for the most part, I just, write the thing, go back and fix the bracket notes, and then do my passes. And usually it's not until I get to the beta reader stage that I'm making bigger changes, because I've put in everything I wanted to put in based on the outline that I came up with. So, and then, with beta readers, who knows what they're going to find? So that's always an adventure.
Makes sense. And yeah, hearing about Vanessa's outlines, the size of them is actually very intimidating to me.
20,000 word outline for the Dragon Next Door.
Wow, that is a lot of words.
And it's part of a world that I've already written in, so there's very little world building notes in that. It was almost entirely like plot and character beats. So
I love that. I respect it so much.
Yeah, I could never, but I respect it very much. Jade.
So, my process is really interesting. I have autism and ADHD, so I require structure, yet I also require no structure. So, I have put together a very eclectic approach that is rather structured, but I can move and replace any single part of it or do it in any order that I like. So I like that. And it's also reversible because I became an editor in order to write the book that I wanted to write. So I did everything backwards. And what I like about my process is I designed it in order to edit other people's things, but it also works backwards to plan things. So what I started with was from a developmental editing course. I stole the idea of a book map. This is the core of what I do, and it is a spreadsheet. I know people hate spreadsheets, but honestly, like the way I do it, I can move any of the columns. I can search any of the things. If I want to rearrange things or edit things, like Vanessa, like you do, and I can't do that in a Word document. I can't. It's too long. I like being able to move the cells around, and it's very easy for me to do that. But at the same time, so I use the book map as sort of the guide, and that will have literally outlines for every single scene or chapter. And I'll have different marks, symbols, points, rows that track everything from the internal plot movement of this, whether it's moving forward or backward, the external plot movement of that, what happens in the character development, what happens in the world building, whether or not we're leaving hooks open for book 1 or 2 or whatever. If it's a standalone, that column isn't even there. Um, so I can put in and remove whatever I like. And then overall, while I'm working with this tool, because the tool is the map essentially that I'm building while I'm running through the dungeon, I'm looking at 7 main elements in the developmental layer. So I'm looking at who is the dynamic main character and are they dynamic? If there's more than one, this applies to all of that. What is the content genre and how does that fit with other content? Like what is expected from this genre? What needs to be in here? And then what do I want in here? How am I making changes? How am I altering that? Point of view, and that if you have multi points of view, you can have multiple columns and you can trace each point of view and independently. Plot structure, this goes for overall structure, but also if you have long chapters, individual scenes, or what's happening with those individual characters and their points of view within that scene, you can trace it all. Thematic connections, world building and setting, if necessary. Sometimes you may or may not need this depending on how comfortable that person is with world building. If it's yourself, you know. If you're editing for someone else, I generally use that column. And I also have a separate one for like tech magic and how that works through the world because it is integral on a developmental level. If you have tech that allows certain amounts of communication and travel, that's going to affect every encounter and how characters plan to do things, what they think is possible. Um, and knowing all of those things, having that map so you can see it all at once and being able to change that at any point in time of the editing process. This is also why I do a lot of coaching because I have a lot of people who are like, I don't like outlines, so generally I'll keep the outline, do the updates and notes, and send it back to the client with the notes so they have it. And then while we're coaching, I will record the call and we'll talk about what they want to change, what they like, what they don't like, their vision for how they see it, like, and based on my notes of what is actually there. And then we work through changing what they want to change until everybody's happy with it. And I mean, if you're working with this on your own, you just do it with yourself. That is my process in a broad scope, but it looks
Excellent.
very different for every individual person.
Yeah, there's definitely, and every book too is different, and so it is going to change a little bit depending on what you're working on, even if it's only your own books that you ever work on.
True.
But I do think having like sort of an overarching system that you can then modify as needed to fit the book that you're working on is great, and actually leads us perfectly into our next question, which is a community question from one of our paid members. This one was submitted anonymously. How do you approach revision differently for a novel that is planned to be the first in a series or trilogy? What changes from revising a standalone? And let's start with Chelsea this time.
Okay. A couple of things, right? I think when you're revising the first book of a trilogy, speaking as someone who's done that and has learned from my mistakes, don't do what I did. It's very, I think it's very important to one, understand that each book has to be a complete story in and of itself. So I think one of the things that as writers, especially if we're newer to it or unfamiliar, or if it's like our first series, you get caught up in the big idea, the big villain that's going to span multiple books, and then you forget that each book still needs to have its own purpose, its own plot, its own development. So, first tip would definitely be to focus on what this book needs to accomplish. It kind of look at it as beginning, middle, end of your story as a whole, like the trilogy, but then microscopic. Your beginning still needs a beginning, middle, and an end, if that makes sense. Um, so kind of narrowing it down that way, and then versus a standalone, I think the hard part of that is somewhat akin to like if you're used to writing a novel and then suddenly you're writing a short story, right? You have less word count to do everything that you have in mind. So when you're editing a standalone, it's like everything that you introduce in the beginning needs to be wrapped up by the end because there's not going to be a second book. There's not going to be a follow-up to continue the story and expand on whatever you started. So making sure that you clean up everything versus trilogy or series, however you want to think about it, you've got space. And I think another really important thing to consider when you're planning for that is how much world building you're going to be, especially in the fantasy setting, right? Because a lot of times in trilogies, that first book is going to be world building, but you don't want to get so heavy in it that you start info dumping and world dumping on the reader because then that bogs it down. So that's kind of where that editing part comes in of making sure you're disseminating information in a way that's like digestible for the reader and just making sure that you're having fun and you're giving space for the reader to breathe, but you're also moving the narrative along. And sometimes balancing that can be a task. So that's kind of where, like I said, at the end, because once you have something rough to look at, you can kind of see the whole picture. That's when you can start moving pieces around it, being like, oh, this might be better to introduce here. I can save this for the second book. It doesn't actually need to be in the first book, etc.
Excellent. CL?
I've never done this.
All right, fair enough. Uh, Vanessa?
Yeah, I think Chelsea covered it pretty much, you know. I because I outline, usually I know what's going to happen. Um, and it's just a matter of in the editing stage making sure that if I've left something open, I have a plan for closing it in future books, um, and that sort of thing. But yeah, for the most part, I covered in my outlines and then everything Chelsea said.
And do you outline the whole series that extensively before starting book one?
So I have only written one series and it wasn't supposed to be a series. I just wrote a book and I was done. And then everyone's like, no, you need to write more. And I was like, I don't know how. And so I just didn't for a long time. And then I figured, oh, well, if I make this intergenerational, then I have something. And so I did. So books two onward were planned as a series very loosely. I had a general idea of where things were going. And because I did write all of the books before, except for the final one, I had them all written before I published any of them. I could go back and be like, oh, I didn't really set this thing up in book four really well. I should go back and like add a little bit to book two. Um, so yeah, I wasn't planning on writing a series when I wrote Dragon Whisperer, and then oh no, I have a series, and I unfortunately you can kind of tell that even though I went back and massaged some things later on, and yeah, planning is great. I don't know if I'm going to write any more series or anything at all, but having an idea of where you're going, crawling through the dungeon and making your map, and then yeah, making sure that you closed everything off per book, that you meant to, because yes, you know, every book has to, even in a trilogy, you have to have, you know, what it's about. I mean, um, C maybe didn't plan it, but like I've read the Witchmark and all of those books, and you know, they all different main characters as well, which I also have in my series, but you know, they're all well contained, but there's this overarching thing going on too. And that's definitely what you have to look at to make sure that it's going to be satisfying, because when you read a book, you might not get to the second book. You want that first one to be satisfying.
Well said. Jade, do you have anything to add?
I think you said it very well, but the main thing is I don't think I would do anything different. It's just a little bit more because the first book of a series needs to be as good as a standalone, plus the extra hooks that lead you into the rest of the series.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And is definitely something that as I embark on my first intentional series, something that I'm thinking about a lot in book one is balancing between having the story that wraps up and also leaving some very interesting and exciting hooks for book two. All right, so our next question is how do you know when you're ready to move on from self-editing to bringing on beta readers? And what advice would you give to writers thinking about bringing beta readers into their process? And let's start with Jade this time.
Ooh, okay. I would say when the degree of improvement that you're making with your own edits is no longer moving your needle, that's the point where you need to start pulling in other people's critique. Once you've got everything in there that you want, and it's the changes that you're making are minuscule, really making, they're not improving it significant. Like you're changing little words here and there. You're not actually significantly improving the story, like it's not significantly improving with each pass. At that point you need some outside critique, but it is important to get the right kind, so and a variety. So you need people who can critique on like just a critique level. They may not necessarily be, you know, they may not read, fantasy. Maybe they read mystery, but they can critique a book really well. It would be useful to get their ideas. It's also useful to get people who read within the same genre because they're going to understand sort of what you're doing um, in conversation with other people in that same genre, how you are the same, how you're different, how you're setting yourself apart in that niche with your story. You also want just general readers who are going to give you a good first impression of, maybe they aren't a critical reader, but they can definitely be like, okay, this part read really slow to me, or I didn't understand how we got from here to here, or what the motivation was in this scene. They're going to pick up on things that either the genre people are going to overlook or the critique people are going to accidentally fill in ahead of time that may not be obvious to your a little bit more less informed readers. Um, those are kind of the three types of critiques that I definitely try to get once I'm at the point where I'm like, I need to bring in critique. At least that's where I start.
Sounds good to me. CL, anything to add?
Generally, I find that like it's more important to me to have an alpha reader. Ideally, I have one person who's willing to read my first draft and call me on my nonsense. Um, I think that, you need the right person to do this. Generally, I like to have somebody who is, up on story. Not They don't necessarily have to be a writer, but they do have to be up on story. And they do have to understand my intention of what I'm doing. And like they have to also, be willing to like read my unpolished first draft stuff. Once I get to the stage where it's like I would be looking at taking on beta readers, I often am on deadline and I don't have time and I just pitch it straight to the editor. Um, but when I was using beta readers, I found that things got more confusing to me when I had more people looking at it. Um, I usually would like be like three people at the most. Because like I've been beta reading for people who have like 9 people in there, and I'm like, girl, what are you doing? um, I just kind of feel like, you want to have the focus and you want to know like what are these beta readers like? What do they look for in a book? And it's also really important to think about anybody who is reading your book and wants your book to be what you want it to be. And if they're not sure, will ask you about what you intend rather than going in and saying that you didn't do it correctly.
Yeah, I really like that. I think it's important to have someone who understands not just story generally, but like what you are actually trying to achieve with your story, because that's the only way they'll really be able to tell you if you've done it or not and give you good advice on that front. Vanessa?
Can you repeat the question?
So the question is, how do you know when it is time to move from self-editing to bringing in beta readers? And what advice would you give to folks who are maybe considering getting beta readers for the first time?
Okay, so I have different reasons, again, depending on the book. Sometimes I know it's time to kick it off to the beta readers when I'm just moving commas around. Like Jade said, I'm not making any improvements. I'm just reading through it and like, maybe I'll change this word to that word, and maybe this sentence would be better there. When you get to that stage, you're done. You've done all you can do. It's time to send it off to somebody else to give you like feedback.
Ideas.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like, hey, yeah, you did okay. There's not much you got to change. Or it's like, oh, here's 5,000 notes. I've never had 5,000. The most I ever had, I think, was 800 comments. It was a lot. But yeah, that's a point where you need to get new, fresh eyes. Your eyes are not fresh. If you're just moving your commas around, you're tapped out. You need someone's new perspective. Another indication that I need a beta reader is I hate it. I don't want to look at it anymore. I am so tired of it. And sometimes it's just like I know it needs something, but I don't know what. And those are the times when I'm like, okay, I need fresh eyes. Beta readers are hard. It's hard to find a good match. And at first I was getting lots and lots of people to beta read for me, and I was finding that I was disregarding a lot of their comments. So I was like, okay, this person's comments aren't very helpful. This person's trying to get me to write the book they want, not the book I want. And that's a skill you have to develop is parsing feedback from other people and being able to figure out what is them trying to get you to write the book they want and what is them seeing what you're trying to do and trying to help you achieve that goal. And I think because I was an editor for a while and, I did courses on how to edit and how to developmental edit and what good editing looks like, that helped me be able to see people who are just trying to be bossy and write my story for me versus people who were trying to help me get the story I wanted to write to the place I wanted it to be. And it just takes time and sticking to your gut, I guess. And that can be hard if your instincts aren't great, but it's something you have to develop as an author, is figuring out how to take feedback and who to take it from. And at this point, I have narrowed myself down to just 2 or 3 people who I will send anything to. And sometimes it's only one person who very reliably will has the time and is familiar with my work and what I'm usually trying to do, and he will get that back to me with comments that will be helpful, and I work really well with asking a lot of questions, and so asking me questions about did you mean for this character to do that? And wait a minute, where's the murder? And those kinds of questions, and other like just questions to get me thinking about what I have done, because sometimes I think I thought about it, but I didn't actually. So finding out what you need from feedback is good too, because some people don't like all those questions. Some people need someone to just say, hey, this is not great. You need to fix this. And some people need people to be prescriptive and say, this is how you should. I don't like people being prescriptive because usually they're wrong. So it's like,
I will
yeah,
say this is exactly why I can't find an alpha reader, because I need all of these things and they're almost never in one person.
yeah.
But I will pick people to fulfill all of those purposes.
Right. Yes. And that's why sometimes you do need multiple. And it's just finding, that's the thing. You've got to find what works for you. You've got to find, if you need multiple beta readers like Jade, or just one like me, or somewhere in between, or if you need an alpha reader instead of a beta reader, you need to figure that out for yourself. And it's not fun and it's not easy. I mean, sometimes it can be fun. If you don't, sometimes I've had like certain people who just, the really bossy kind of people, they're not fun. But sometimes you get people who ask the right questions, or give you the right kind of like, this is what you should do to change it. Um, so sometimes it can be fun and it can be an adventure, and it can be like,
It
oh
will
yes.
always grate a little bit though, because literally you're trying to look for people who complement you, who are the pieces you are missing in your story,
Yeah.
who can highlight those. And it's a little painful because they're like, you're missing this. This isn't here. This isn't connected. But that's exactly what you need.
Yeah.
And then you also need to find people who can deliver it the right way.
Absolutely. I have about 4 or 5 different people that I go to for beta reading, but not necessarily the same people for every project. For example, in Woman of Sorrow and Blood, the thing that I most recently had with beta readers, I sent it very specifically to my friend KJ Harrowick, who had done some reading for me before, but the thing that I was struggling with was that book had a stronger romance plotline than anything else I'd written, and I was like, I can feel that the pacing of this romance is off, but I don't do romance, but I know that, the romance in her book was really strong, so I sent it to her specifically when I was at that point to help me with that aspect of the story. And obviously she also gave me great feedback on other things, and it wasn't just that, but it was like, I'm specifically pulling you out of my beta reader pool because I know you're really good with this aspect of story that I'm having a harder time with.
And that
And
is why to cultivate many people.
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah. And
Chelsea. Oh,
Jade makes a good point about how the feedback is delivered, because one of the beta readers I stopped using was giving feedback in a way that was, I mean, it was the right, like, this person wasn't wrong. It was just the delivery made me not want to open the document ever again. So that's important too.
yeah, I appreciate that. Chelsea, your thoughts on when and how to bring in beta readers?
Um, I honestly I agree with basically everything that everyone else has said. I had a couple of thoughts. One, regarding alpha readers, I have like my readers broke down into like different levels, like a little hierarchy. And so like at the very top is my PFP, my primary feedback provider. That is my husband. He reads everything, all of the drafts. And part of the reason why I love that is because he only reads my stuff in the sense of like he reads like light novels and manga and comics and things like that. And he knows what a good story is, but he's not deep into the fantasy world. So he's just like, is this fun? And I'm like, if he's enjoying it, at the very least, I accomplished the first thing that a book should be, and that's entertaining, right? And then after that, I have what I call my author council. Those are my two author friends that I love to death, and they have completely different tastes. One is very like, give me action. I want death. I want murder. I want an adventure. And the other one is just like, please just make them kiss. That's all I want. And so I'm just kind of like, if I can get something that is, you know, entertaining to them both, because they think about it very different. They think about storytelling very differently. They write very different things, but we kind of all exchange our experiences and the things that we like to kind of help each other grow. Because the one who's like, just make them kiss, me and my other friend are like, okay, well, something needs to happen. Like we need an adventure. We need a plot here, right? Whereas she's really good at being like, hey, I think we need some emotional development. I think this character arc needs to be a little bit stronger. And so it kind of like feeds each other. So for me, by the time I get to beta readers, I'm usually at a point where I'm like, I I don't know if this is weird or not, but I pull in beta readers when I'm like, I need to know how other people are interacting with the story, not necessarily how to fix it, right? So I'm less like, oh, let me know if this is working, or let me know what you think about this. There are some elements that I'm usually like, let me know, because I'm I'm that over the top girly that's like, oh, I'm gonna actually send you a questionnaire that's gonna have things that I need you to answer in depth, like paragraph, like essay form, right? after you read the story because I just need information, right? But most of the time, I'm just like, I read the comments because I'm like, I want to know how you interacted with it. Where did you feel like you were into it? Because ironically, I love that part when you're looking through the document and then the comments are just like one, and then you get like 10, 15 pages and there's no comments. 'Cause I was like, oh, you were into it. You were just reading. You completely forgot that you were supposed to be leaving me feedback. That means I was doing my job the way that I needed to, right?
So you
But
basically wait until you're secure in the story, and then you're making sure with the beta readers that you're delivering that.
that I'm delivering that. And it's also, I have found that with beta readers, because it's kind of like what you guys said, as far as like you have to find the right beta readers, because some people are, their heart is in the right place. They are not very useful. That information is just like, I didn't like this. Okay,
Why?
why? Like,
Which part?
what happened? Or it's the delivery of it. And then it'll be like, I didn't like this. And then you'll get like an 8-page dissertation where they have to like make another comment to continue on with the rant. And I'm just like, that also was
It's
not
not
helpful.
helpful.
Right. So for me, it's more so I want to know where I can improve on the story, but I'm less looking for, like Vanessa said, prescriptive of this fell off or this wasn't working or I think you should do yada yada yada.
It's more like this hit
Just
like this.
right, like this didn't land the way that I think you did. I can go find a solution because ultimately I'm still going to pay somebody to go
Mhm.
through it because even as an editor myself and self-editing, like you guys said, you get to a point where you're not making it better, you're just making it different, right? And so at that point it's like I'm going to pay a professional, and my top tier team, they are also professionals in their field. Like they're one friend is a copy editor, one friend is a developmental editor. So it's kind of like by that point it's already been through like 3 editors by the time it gets to my beta readers, just naturally by who I'm working with, right? So by then I'm like, how are you interacting it with the reader? Because something else that I've also realized is that if you ask a writer about feedback on your book, they're going to look at it more so from a craft standpoint. Whereas if you ask
Mhm.
a reader, they're going to be like, oh my God, this was so fun. I loved it. Something was off right here. I don't know what it was, but I had a good
And you
time.
do need both of those. You need both of those types of feedback.
You need both. And so I think for me, when it comes to deciding when to do it is after, like I said, I've done all that I can. I need to know how regular readers are interacting with it, what their feedback is, and then also um for me, I'm extra because I'm one of those people where when I do beta readers, everybody gets their own document because I hate it when I get a document and I see 15 people are already through it. And then I'm like, I can't leave a comment where I want to leave a comment because 3 people have already left a comment in the same area. So everybody gets their own document. And then for me, it's like, okay, where's the commonality? Because kind of like my mom says, everybody's not wrong, right? So
Mhm.
if I send it to 3 different people and 3 of the different people point out the same thing in their individual documents, it's like, oh, this is something that collectively I missed, or something that from a craft standpoint might pass. Because like, oh, I like how you subverted the trope there. But as a reader, they're just like, why didn't she just do this? I don't understand. Explain that to me. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And there's definitely differences in different kinds of feedback. And I will say also, really it is the best compliment you can get when you've sent something off for feedback and you get the feedback. I had to actually like pause and remind myself that I'm supposed to be giving feedback here because I was having so much fun.
That's the best kind of feedback. It's
It
like, thank you
Totally.
for
is.
stroking my ego. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Hey, look, being a writer is hard. And so I will take the ego stroking where I can get it. We all need it. There's enough hard knocks in this industry.
So,
Absolutely.
if you are feeling bad about your draft and like the brain weasels are at you and the imposter syndrome is hard, find that one person to give you a cheerleader feedback. I have one friend, and I only send it to her if like I need someone to lift me up. And she will only go through and only comment when like she loves something. And it's like super duper like, yeah, this is awesome. This is so great. And so it's all the comments are how amazing you are. And that's helpful too, because you need to know what you did right and that you did something right. Like, so I have
that is my
depressions.
one caveat, that they have to be accurate. Like, they have to pick out
Yes.
accurate things that
Yes.
they like, that
Don't
are
tell me things are
genuinely
great when
good.
they're not, but like when you really loved something, and that's what she'll do. She'll go through and just like point out just the stuff that she loves. And that's helpful too, because like this is a hard industry and we're working at it on our own so much that, you know, the brain weasels and the imposter syndrome really do get to you sometimes. And so having that one friend who can do that, if that's what you need, is fantastic. So I'm just going to put that out there, that maybe you need a cheerleader sometimes. So
I
find a
will
cheerleader.
also say, this is like when I try to do my developmental editing sessions with coaching, this is one thing that I try to end on, because like you spend like an hour tearing things apart, figuring out what you can fix, what's wrong, what's bad. So like when you end it, the last 5 minutes, you're like, by the way, this part was amazing. This character has come so far. Look how much you've done since we started. Like, and you just end it that way. It's hard to do that, I find, with written feedback. So I do appreciate like that part of being able to do that when I coach.
I agree,
Because you can wear both the hats.
Whenever I do developmental editing, I always start all of my letters like, hey, just so you know, you paid me to tell you how to make this better. I don't think you're bad at this, but you did pay me to tell you what was wrong with it. So that's what we're going to focus on. However, I like you. You're good. Keep doing what you're doing. Right. But also let's to get into this, right? Because I feel like sometimes people need that reminder. And then also, for anyone who needs it, it's perfectly okay to ask for beta readers and you're looking for hype men. I always say that like you need your hype team, but then you also need your homies. And your homies are the ones who are going to hold you accountable and keep you from going outside looking crazy. But sometimes you need a hype team, be like, "Yes, you did that. I love this line. I love this character." Like that's all. That's it. I need joy.
And like as an editor, it's really good to make sure you definitely put in those positive points if you're doing an edit for someone else, because honestly, I've seen so many clients use it as marketing material, because if they're getting a lot of beta feedback not from, you know, a paid professional, that paid professional feedback that you as an editor can give them is actually great for like their marketing, for directing how they start thinking about their book in a positive light, that the way they can push those points, whether they're trad or indie publishing. And I will say it's even more valuable for indie publishing, because honestly, it's hard for them to afford multiple passes of paid editing.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, so I do have a couple more moderator questions, but there's an audience question that fits perfectly into where we are in the conversation right now. So I'm gonna jump into that. And we will have time for a couple more audience questions as well. If folks want to leave those in the text chat, just make sure you put question in capital letters at the beginning of your message to make it stand out from the rest of the chat. So this is a question from Abigail, who asks, what are your best pick-me-ups for reigniting love for the work after you receive unuseful feedback during the revision phase? So I'm gonna start with Vanessa here, because I just have this feeling you've got something good to say here.
Oh, okay. So the first time I received really bad feedback and it crushed my will to live, I got really drunk and ate a whole pan of brownies. Don't do that.
Hey,
I mean, the
as long as
brownies
you only
aren't
do
bad.
it once, it's fine.
I mean, yes, I only did it the one time and then learned how to take bad feedback better. But yeah, the first time was rough. It was really rough, and I ate and drank my feelings. And you know, sometimes that's what you got to do. It's the taking a step back and taking a breather and letting it percolate. You always need to do this, even if the feedback didn't crush your soul. It's good to just take a step back and let it percolate. And that's what I tend to do. So I'm not hiding the fact that I'm burnt out and I'm actually quitting the industry. And I've had a few rounds of burnout and have pulled myself back out of it. And sometimes what you need to do when things are tough is to just step away and like refill the well. And I can say things we can like have done a whole thing on burnout. So I won't get into that, but refilling your well. And if it's one story in particular that you got some bad feedback about and it's made you feel really down on yourself in the story, is to just try and go through it and find the things that you love about it. Why did you write that story? There's a reason that you wrote it. So find it and reacquaint yourself with the things that you love about it. And then again, let it simmer, and until you reignite your will to keep going, because just because you got bad feedback doesn't mean it's a bad book. Sometimes the feedback is wrong, sometimes it's right, and you just need a minute to figure out how you're going to fix it in a way that makes you still happy with your story.
Absolutely. I will also say one thing I love about doing things over email is that I can step away and no one notices. And also, a lot of the time when I receive feedback, good or not, I will actually just be like, okay, I've received your feedback. I'm going to actually look at it in a couple of days and then get back to you. And often I'll scan it like right when I receive it, but I will actually then set it aside for a couple days and come back to it and process it in full. Because even with good, helpful feedback, it's going to sting a little. This is your baby, right? CL, any thoughts on this?
Okay, so like here's the thing about like um receiving unuseful feedback during the revision phase. I extremely dislike when this happens, like very, very, very much. Um, One of the things that I do when I like receive feedback that's basically got me feeling like maybe I screwed this up and I suck and I should have never written anything and this is it. They found me out that I am fraud. Is that I have to go to one of my friends. Um, I have two friends in particular to do this, and I basically need them to armed goon the comments on this story. What I need them to do is I need them to go, okay, there's a point there, but it's really badly written. Maybe it means this, or utterly disregard this. And what it is I give them a copy of the Word document, and if it's a comment that they super duper don't agree with, they'll just delete it off. They'll just get rid of it just because like I am a hot horse flower when it comes to that kind of a feedback. So if I get feedback that is causing me to doubt my ability to write a book worth reading for more than 10 minutes before throwing it away, I kind of wind up on this emotional hamster wheel. And what I basically need there is I need somebody who's bigger and stronger than me to come in and protect me. um but it's like sometimes it's easier than others. Like if I have somebody who comes in and they start dog whistling or saying with their whole chest that I am writing to an agenda and not actually creating art, I can be like, well, you're dumb and your dog is ugly and you need to leave now. um
Yes.
What did the dog ever do to you?
well, I
Not the
mean,
dog.
Supporting the wrong person.
right? It's just kind of like I need them to have the same smack my chest and gasp outrage as I did. I'm going to be childish and I'm going to tell them that their dog is ugly at this point. Um and it's just like, because I have gotten these comments before in the past. Um and it's just always like, look, dude, nobody asked you. And if you want to take your sad, ugly puppy over there and hang out with the rest of the people who have sad, ugly puppies from 2014, you're welcome to do so. But you're no longer in my manuscript or my life.
I love it. And those sound like some really great friends. Every one of us should get some of those friends. Chelsea?
Um, I like CO's way of going about things. But no, I would say one, feel your feelings, right? Because a lot of times, whether feedback is good or bad or unhelpful completely, you're going to have a reaction to it, and that's perfectly normal. Just give yourself space to have that reaction. And then if it's unhelpful or if it's bad, um, personally, I don't know if it's healthy or not. It's healthy for me. I take it to the group chat and I'm just kind of like, okay, so first of all, I need you guys to tell me if they're right, delivery or not, are they right? And when they tell me that no, this person's actually insane, We just have a little kiki in the chat and we drag them collectively, right? Where it's just like they don't know what they're talking about. They're probably illiterate. They probably like stuttering in second grade when they had to read out loud, whatever. And then sit with it. And then be like, okay, how am I going to modify myself or modify my system so that when I'm looking for beta readers again, when I have to do this process again, I'm not running across people who are going to respond to me this way, who are going to be unhelpful. Like obviously you don't know until you know, but you do start learning to ask some questions up front, like, hey, have you ever beta read before? Like, is this a brand new experience for you? And then kind of putting up safeguards of, do you actually read in this genre? And then once you have a backlog, being like, have you read one of my books before? Because that's also a really good litmus test, especially for myself and what I write. Because I always say I write books about Black girls who aren't all that nice, meaning that I have Black girls and they commit murder. Every single book that I write, there's a Black girl and she's committing murder and nobody cares. Okay. That's not the point. The problem isn't the murder. The problem is what made her do the murder. Okay. That's what we're focusing on. However, it's one of those things that I know that is not going to be for everybody. That's not everybody's cup of tea. And so if it's not, cool, but I am going to tell you up front that this is what you're getting into. So if you're looking for like a soft fairy princess damsel in distress, I cannot help you. I don't know why you're here. We should probably move along. Right. So just setting clear expectations. And then also, I think getting to a point where you could just say no. Like, thank you for volunteering. No, thank you. I will not be sending my book to you, and girding yourself so that you don't have, you're not constantly running into unhelpful advice. But as for me, myself, when I get up, like I said, when I get bad advice, I'm just kind of like, well, F you and your mama too. How about that? How about that? And then I sit and I'm like, you know what? They might have been right. And then I go make the corrections. But yeah,
I love
I
that.
feel like that was all over the place. I'm so sorry.
That was great because it did a good job of tackling the like different types of unhelpful feedback, because sometimes it really is unhelpful and sometimes it's a demographic thing and you just ended up with the wrong reader, and sometimes it actually is helpful. It just takes a while to be able to accept that the feedback actually is
Sometimes you have to
helpful.
set your feelings aside and be like, you
Yeah.
know what? Maybe this romance isn't working the way that I need to. Maybe the yearning isn't there. Maybe this isn't insta love. Maybe the magic doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Jade, anything to add?
Oh man. I agree with everything that was said. I find it really rare now that I actually receive feedback that impacts me emotionally that strongly. For it to do that, it would either have to be someone like that I truly respect their opinion, and like we have very different opinions on how I did something. Because generally, this is probably just from being an editor and giving and receiving so much feedback over the years. I've really come to look for the harsher feedback, because either it falls into generally one of two categories. Either it's ridiculous and this person has an emotional agenda and they're not really, like, there's something going on with the delivery, or they're just wrong. So if the delivery is off and the point is there, I just dig through all that, pull out the point, and use it. And I've gotten really good at that. It's probably like literally just the amount of feedback I've gone through. And I think if you do it for a long time, you can get to that point where, like, now when I get very surface feedback, it's like, oh, that's great. I'm like, that is utterly useless. I cannot use it. Please critique something. Tell me something you didn't like. Just so I can get that kind of, like, I start looking for that. I know a lot of people are trying to avoid that, but I actually look for it because that tells me where the person reacted enough for me to figure out a why. And that's just my experience.
I like that. We'll see how Jade feels when I'm actually finally beta reading something of hers.
Dude, I've been wanting feedback for this
Hopefully
so
we're
long. I'm
still
like, I just want to
friends.
finish it so people can rip it
months.
apart. Please rip it apart. It's been in my head for 12 years. Stop.
All right, so moving on to the moderator questions. We have two more, and then we have some questions from the audience in the chat. So Line editing can be tricky because you've already spent so much time looking at your book. What tricks or techniques do you use to make it easier to spot issues with structure or spelling? And let's start with Chelsea this time.
Um, I think my advice for that, especially since caveat, I'm not a line editor, like because I get blind to a story really easily. Um, my piece of advice is kind of what I've said before, and I think it's kind of common advice, is to read it aloud, right? Either read it aloud yourself, or you can, there are so many programs that will read it aloud for you. Avoid the AI ones if you can, but like Microsoft Word has a read aloud feature. There are a lot of accessible features that just have it out loud when you can hear it. And one of the things that I prefer is they have like a lot of natural sounding voices that you can use. I like the robot voice. I like the robot voice because if you can make the robot
Distancing.
sound, it's the distancing, but also if you can make the robot sound like a person, you
Sure.
generally have a good rhythm and cadence and breaks in your storytelling. Whereas if it sounds crazy, it probably reads crazy too. Um, that and also like I know this sounds crazy, but like spell check is your friend, you know? Um, sometimes it gets it wrong, especially if it is, like pro writing aid and has AI features that sometimes don't work properly.
Or
When
you
it's
write
just like,
fantasy.
hey, or you write fantasy, let you make up a name, let you make up a place, let you make up a term. It's not going to know what it is. And also, just as someone who uses AAVE in my writing, it's like sometimes it's just like, did you mean? No, I said what I said and I meant it, but the way I meant it. I'm good. Thank y'all. But also, it is it is really helpful sometimes, especially with the grammar things and that are common, like lay versus laid. Like she laid down. It's like, oh no, she lay down.
Mm.
Whatever. Little things like that. Um, I would say pay attention to it, but also take it with a grain of salt. That's also really helpful in just drawing your attention to things that you should probably pay a little closer attention to, even if you don't ultimately end up changing it.
Mm.
But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Other than that, pay somebody else to do it. That's all I got.
Vanessa?
Yeah, read it out loud is my top bit of advice. If you're not on deadline and you have a lot of time, put it aside for as long as you can. The longer, the better, because then you forget what you wrote and you're looking at it with fresh eyes. Um, that doesn't always work if you're on deadline, but like if this is just something you're writing on spec and you're, eventually going to query it or whatever, or you're self-publishing and, you get to make your deadlines. Give yourself as much time as possible. Have a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever you've got time for. The longer, the better. And then when you come back to it, you're like, oh, what did I do? This doesn't make any sense because your eyes are finally fresh again. Like whatever amount of time it takes for you to be fresh coming back to this manuscript. If you can give yourself that much time, give yourself that much time. And then yes, hire somebody else.
All very well said. Jade?
Um, ooh. Yeah, definitely take a break if you can. Obviously, it's not always possible. Definitely read aloud. Now, I'm taking a psychology degree. I can tell you that the part of your brain you use for reading with your eyes and the part of you that is comprehending speech that is spoken, even if it's coming out of your own mouth, is actually two different parts of your brain. So this does work. Um, two things to add. If you have a multi-point of view, try going through each point of view separately, if possible. This will, like, any way you can go through your book in a different order, will help you look at it differently. Go backwards if you can. Go one point of view at a time. Whatever you can do to change the original chronological order of the book, without screwing up your process, it definitely helps you look at it differently.
Awesome. CL, I know you said this isn't your strength, but do you have anything to add here?
I actually do. Because the thing is that, when you're saying line editing, I'm not thinking of it as proofreading. I'm thinking of it as like your final detail-oriented, obsessive prose edit, which to me is very different from proofreading. I'm still gonna write words wrong. I just am. Um, I just wanted to write a really quick note in the chat so that people knew that about um, if you have multiple POVs, you can, like, if you read each POV on its own, POV reading can be done easily in Scrivener by bookmarking the scenes that have this particular person's POV. You can just then read only the scenes that are bookmarked in a certain way. So you can go down them like one by one. Um, you know, I knew I wasn't going to be able to get out of here without making some kind of a Scrivener plug. And there it is. There are two things that I do. One of the I'm definitely on like team read it out loud. And I totally get the like let the robot read it because, you know, when the robot sounds crazy, that's where you have to look. And I do that, especially if I'm like looking at a scene and I'm like something's off and I can't figure out what it is. But
Mhm.
I am a big team read it out loud with your own mouth kind of person because I know enough audiobook narrators to know what happens when somebody has written something and they've never actually tried to say it. And when they're like, okay, well, I had to read this thing and it was like professional narrator on closed course, do not attempt. And I don't want to do this to my narrators. So if I can't say it, I'm not going to make them say it.
That
The
is a really
other
good point.
The other thing that I will do when I have the luxury of time, and I did this for even though I knew the end because I was like, you know what, YOLO, it's only 23,000 words, is I put the manuscript on one half of my screen. I have a very wide screen. And then I put a blank page on the other half of my screen and I started transcribing from one side to the other side. This is a lot of work. The transcribed version is leaps and bounds ahead of the final version that I would have handed in otherwise. I stand behind this. It's still the best prose I've ever written in my career because I took the time to do that. So if you have the time and you want to make sure, like if the prose is a big factor in the selling point of this particular book, that side by side transcription is really going to help you. What I did was I divided it up into like 5-page chunks. I would transcript for 5 pages and then I would eat a cookie and play video games for the rest of the day.
Sounds legit.
And
Very
I love
legit.
since
that system.
yeah,
It's
and
great.
since like it was like I don't know 125 pages, it was like 6 weeks to go through it like that, and I think it really paid off.
Amazing. Yeah, that sounds super helpful. A couple other things I know a lot of folks do is they'll change the font or the font size,
Mhm.
or they'll print it out or even transfer it onto an ebook reader or their phone
Yeah,
or
different
something that
program.
they can
Yeah.
read it in a
I
different program and maybe in a different space. You know, you write it at your desk and then you read it in your living
Change your
room or the
environment.
library or
yeah.
something like that.
I usually switch up programs. So like I'll draft in like Dabble
Mhm.
Writer, but then I'll export it and I'll put it in like a, a Word document to go through it. And then when I'm ready for feedback, I'll put it in ellipsis. So each time I'm looking at it differently. The formatting is the same, but the way they break up the paragraphs and the default fonts and the
It makes
sizing
a
are
big
all different.
difference.
Makes a huge difference because you'll see something and you'll be like, oh. And then also all of their editing software is slightly different. So like
Mhm.
the things that Google will catch are not the same things that Microsoft Word are going to catch.
Mhm.
So that's also really helpful.
Yeah, that's great. That is excellent advice. So we have one more question for me, and then we're going to jump into, we have a couple of audience questions. This is actually another community question. What are some pitfalls in the revising process you've encountered that specifically newbies, people coming into this for the very first time, should be watching out for? And let's start with CL this time.
Okay. The very first stage that I use in revision is assessment, and I do not change a single thing until I am done the assessment. You can't just go in there and start whipping stuff around willy-nilly. You have to know what you have actually on the page. and how it squares with what you were trying to do. Because you need to compare the two things. There are a bunch of different techniques that you can use for this. Like I showed off my Microsoft Word table that I use to like do my scene assessments. Um, and that will work. The editing map from Fiction University has a 30-day revise your novel kind of game plan. It's there, it's free, it's been there for years if you want to use it. Would probably also help you. But like, yeah, I need people to understand what they are trying to do before they set to the work of doing it.
Yeah, that's great. Vanessa?
Yeah, agreeing with C. Assessing what you've got is important. I can do it while I'm drafting now. Sometimes I will change something halfway through and just leave a note. You got to go back and change this. I leave a lot, like I said, brackets, lots of note to self. You have to go back to this chapter and change that, or, that sort of thing. And part of my assessment is looking at my outline versus what I actually did. And was I right to go off the outline? Usually, yes. But sometimes, oh no, I really need to bring that back in. And yes, there's a lot of assessment that needs to be done. I'm drawing a blank on other pitfalls because it's been a really long time. Like I was a child when I started drafting, so and like self-editing, and I can't remember back 30 years. But a lot of this comes down to knowing what works for you. And there's just so much just figuring your own stuff out as a newbie in self-editing and all the rest of it.
Fair enough. Chelsea?
I would say the pitfall is over editing, right? Because I think we hear that writing is rewriting, right? But there does get to a point where you can do too much, right? And sometimes, especially if you are, I'll say in the beginning, there's linear thoughts. My God. Okay. In the beginning, when you're a beginner writer, the advice is always to finish the draft before you go back. But then, throughout the course, I think all of us have at some point to some extent said, we can edit a little bit as we draft, as we write. But when you're a newbie, when you're very new, I don't recommend that because you'll end up going back and changing things, and you'll never get to the end. And you'll hear more experienced writers say, "Oh, I edit as I go," and then you'll try that, and then you'll get caught in a loop, and you'll never get to the end. So definitely finish a draft before you get caught in the editing loophole because it definitely can become that. And then also, kind of like what CL said, know when you need to edit, and then also know what it is that you're trying to accomplish with your edit. Because sometimes you do fall into the trap of changing things just to make them different. And it's just like, you'll be there for a very long time, writing a lot of words in the same paragraph, in the same scene, in the same chapter. Because when you have the imagination of a writer, you start changing things, and it's like, oh, well, what if this happened? And oh, what if that happened? And it can get very cyclical. You get stuck in a cycle, and that's not the goal. So know what it is that you're trying to change. Wait until you have a draft to start working on your edits. And even when you get to a point where you can edit as you go, um, be mindful of how much editing you're doing because there's a difference between going back and being like, oh, adding bracket notes, like, oh, a note to myself. So and so went into this room, so they're not in the kitchen anymore. They're in a living room. You need to go back and change that. Versus, oh, I'm going to make it so that the kitchen is magical and there's a talking teapot and there's a new character and it's going to do this and is that. Just go with the flow and then come back to the things and then also let yourself let go of some of your editing things because sometimes you'll write notes to yourself and you'll be like in the moment, oh, this is a great idea. I'll come back to it. And then you come back to it and be like, I mean, I could do this or I could not. And sometimes you have to let the idea go and be like, we'll save that for another time, another day.
Well said. Jade?
Oh my goodness. Okay. It depends what you mean by new, but if this is your first time ever doing self-editing, I highly, highly advise paying for at least a manuscript assessment. I understand full developmental editing is expensive as hell. It is the most expensive kind of editing, but the manuscript assessment is absolutely worth it. Manuscript assessment is the first step of developmental editing, and it is that assessment thing. You are going to have trouble if this is your first one doing your own assessment because you don't know what you don't know. At the very least, get a paid version the first time and piggyback off that until you understand what they're looking for, and then you can start doing your own modification. If I want to speak to like the people who edit as they go, that comes when you understand what the ultimate goal of your story is. So when you're doing that self-editing, you're not just pulling in random shit from wherever. Maybe you are. If I'm doing that, if my ADHD horse is loose and I'm just pulling in random ideas, those go in the bracket in the margin. Any legit in canon editing that I'm doing as I'm going, I'm only putting it in if I know this is a better way to get where I'm going. But you can't do that effectively until you've multiple times understood where you're going and understood what things are appropriate to change on the way there and how much work that's going to make for yourself or not make for yourself later, because that's really the only reason to do self-editing. Will it save you work later? And the best way to determine if it will or not is having a very firm idea of where you're going. Maybe not exactly how you're getting there, but will this detour still go to the same place? If yes, okay, we can add it in. We can always change it later as we come back and forth through it. And I've changed, like, my chapter 2 has changed a billion times. Chapter 1 hasn't changed. The further chapters after it haven't changed, but that one chapter keeps changing because I'm like, I don't know how to take this person from the very beginning to this place that I need them in chapter 3. So I have like 17 billion versions of way to do that. And that will always change as I go through it. But is it getting you better or closer to where you're going? Is it related to where you're going? If you're taking it off on a completely random thing, and this is especially true if you're trying to write a series, you cannot go off on random tangents because that will change your book 4, your book 5, your book 7 down the line.
Yeah.
So if you are new, do join a class, pay for something, get a very good semi-professional or professional idea, at least at the assessment stage, of what people are even looking for with structure. Follow a lot of podcasts, follow a lot of like good blogs, and developmental editing resources, and get your bones very solid, because if you can get your bones solid, then I definitely feel better about you self-editing on the way, because a lot of that will be style stuff. But if you're changing your bones constantly, you're never going to finish your story, quite frankly.
Well said. As the
Yeah.
person who's been working on her story for 12 years, I think Jade knows all about this. All right.
Also, I want to add that when you are doing your editing, make copies, because when you're
Yes.
going back
Oh
to
God.
change things, because you'll
You'll
think,
lose the
oh,
old
this is
thing.
great. You'll lose the old thing. When you finish your book, you should have like 18 different alternate versions of your book saved on a file drive somewhere.
And also
at
a
least.
fragments file that's a bunch of random shit that will never fit anywhere.
Yes. And also graveyard. So that one line
Yes.
that you're like, oh my God,
It's
this is
dead.
written so well. It's so pretty. It doesn't fit. It's got to go. Put it in the graveyard. Resurrect it later. But
Have a
keep
funeral.
everything.
I always have a folder in all of my Scrivener projects, and it's called the Island of Misfit Words.
Love
And
it.
so anything that I want to take out of the draft, I will like highlight it, cut it, and then put it in a separate document inside the folder called the Island of Misfit Words. My Island of Misfit Words usually winds up with like tons of words. Like, please do not worry. Like, I think my biggest island was like 30,000 words, because I'm a pantser and sometimes I just go in
My
totally
biggest
the wrong
island was twice the
direction.
size of the novel.
And
Yeah.
and so, but I put it all in there because sometimes I'll be like, oh, I need that. Actually, it wasn't wrong. It was just in the wrong place. Well, there it is in the Island of Misfit Words. I can like open it up and I can just steal whatever I want. But it's not actually stealing. It's just me being the triumphant Asian dad who knows exactly where that one thing he saved for 15 years that he knew would come in handy one day finally came in handy.
Yep.
Amazing.
I saw that TikTok video of that guy. going under the bed to find the one thing, and when he pulled it out and he lifted it over his head and did this, I was like, this is the payoff. This is why you
Yeah.
save things, because they
You
will
save
come in handy
everything.
one day.
It will. It will. Because I've had moments where I'm like, especially with like this one project that I'm working on, that I've been working on for like 2 years, which is extremely long for me. And I've just been going back and forth and back and forth. And then I'm like, okay, I've got it. And then I'm like, oh, you know, it'd be great. This would actually add and I'll have a scene that's completely just sitting there. It's like 10,000 words. And I'm like, oh, well, I could just take 2,000 of this and then boom, clean it up, transcribe it, and we're good to go. We don't have to go back to the creation of the wheel. It comes in handy.
Yeah. Because I think, like, the idea of, like, you already know how a story works before you
Mm-hmm.
start writing stories. That principle, like, shows itself to me in that um I will get to a point where I'm like, okay, this isn't working, but I don't know why. And I know it's because I know how the story works. Um and then when I'm figuring it out, this usually means is like, oh, okay, well, it doesn't work because this piece here doesn't work, so I'm going to take it out. But I already know how a story works, because there's so often I come back to that and I'll be like, I was right, but I was also like, I was wrong about like what it was supposed to do or where it was supposed to be. Or it could be that like this was the wrong result of a character action, because as I said before, it's like character action is the plot, and events of the plot spur on character action. And I do this weird thing where I call it the character conflict daisy,
Mm-hmm.
where I have circles with like the main characters, and it's like, what do they want? And I have like actually like kind of a blank PDF, and I will print it out. And so when I'm stuck, I'll be like, this is the situation, I'll put it in the middle, and it's like I'll just write notes around it about how each person thinks about it, why they want to like stick their head in the sand under it or whatever, right? And as I'm like just kind of info dumping all of this stuff about the characters around this situation, a lot of the times what happens is I will stop and go, wait, that's horrifying, and I will run to the manuscript to write it in there.
Not that's horrifying. It's like, oh, you know what you need? Trauma. Let's go ahead and add that in.
It's
That's
like,
my entire approach to character development.
it's like,
It's
good
like,
golly, Billy, Olive's really in a jam now. I'm looking for that moment.
but it makes sense. And that's what you need. And I think the fact that you have systems, I think that's ultimately when it comes to editing and when it comes to writing and drafting, everybody's trying to find their system that works. Where it's just like when you hit those roadblocks, how do I get past them? How do I get around them? What do I do? And you have your conflict daisy. And for me, I'm like, oh, when I get to that point, I'm like, I need to actually go take a nap. I need to sit here. I need to lay down. I need to not look at a screen or a keyboard and just have that. I don't know why, but like the millennial me is like, did y'all ever see Chalk Zone? And it's just like he draws like a little portal on the chalk, and then he goes in, and it's all of his like imaginary friends and stuff. It's a fun show. It was only like one season. Anyway, I have to have like a Chalk Zone moment where it's just like I'm laying there and I'm having and I'm just thinking about everything and all the possibilities because my brain goes way faster than my hands can. And it's just like, okay, let's see which one of these routes I end up going down the rabbit hole. And for
Mm.
me, and I know this sounds crazy, then I take a nap and I'm like, if I remember it when I wake up, then I'm like, that's the idea that stuck. That's the one we need to go with.
That doesn't sound crazy to me at all. That sounds
No.
perfectly reasonable and not that far off from what I do. You know, we all have those ideas that come to us when we're trying to go to bed. And sometimes it's
Sticky
so
note
intense
ideas.
that I physically do have to get out of bed and write it down. But a lot of the time I tell myself, okay, cool, this sounds good right now, but I'm going to sleep. And if I wake up and I remember it, then it is actually worth doing.
Then it's
I
actually a good idea.
I will take a voice note sometimes when I'm in that position. And so like
Yeah.
if it's like I have a shortcut for the voice note, and of course I hit it. And so it'll be like, Diane, what if I telegraph the document they're going to need in an earlier scene and then show that document again in another scene, but don't make a big deal about it. And then I go to bed. I have a little thing that if I make this kind of a note, I have it automatically set to remind me at 11 o'clock that I made a voice note and that I should probably listen to it.
I love that system. Do you use a particular program?
Like the voice note on Apple works really well for this, actually.
How do you set the alerts on it?
Well, you use an Apple shortcut.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to look that up now.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I'm
That
over
is
here on
better than
Android,
sticky notes
like,
by my bed.
I just send a
That's why I'm
text
like, there's
message
got to
to
be an app
myself.
that does it too. Also works, yeah.
Yeah, because I like waking
The
up to the notification in my notification bar, like, oh, that's right, I did have this idea at 2 a.m.
the other thing that I'm doing on my new phone right now is I've installed a voice to text utility. And so what I'll do is I'll just go in and I'll write myself an email and then I will like press the voice to text and then I will talk. And then I will just, stop it and then send the email so that when I get up in the morning, it'll be like, oh, I sent myself an email in the middle of the night. This ought to be good.
I kind of love that. You're giving yourself random writing presents.
Yeah, that's
Say.
great. I'm sure some of them are less than coherent, but I'm sure some of them are also real winners. All
Right.
right, let's get into these audience questions. The first one we have here is, how do you track your progress while editing? It's easy to track word count when drafting, but editing often means taking stuff out or rewriting. So, what do you track and how? And let's start with CL this time.
Are we starting with me?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, when you're actually drafting, it's really easy to track what you're doing because you can just track word count and that ideally it is number goes up, right? And so then you're editing and it's like a lot of the time number goes down and that's actually good. Um so what I do is I get a little bit more specific about what I did that day. My baseline is like how much time did I spend working on
Mm.
whatever it is. Um and again, this is me. I use technology. It's like I don't use AI, but I use technology. I have a stopwatch utility on my phone, and so when I'm ready, I'll just click it, and then I'll just, I'll do whatever, and then the stopwatch is ticking in front of me, so I can see it. So it'll just be like I'll look down and I'll be like, okay, well I'm not thinking. I'll pause the stopwatch and I'll track the time. So that's one way. Another way is to track actually what I did. This is a bullet journaling technique that I got, which was like the reverse technique. Instead of trying to plan out what I did that day, I'm going to actually record what I did that day. Usually like on an hourly tracker. So I'll be like, okay, well, I took a look at chapter 17 and I was handling the continuity problem about like a secondary character who twisted their knee. And then I like had to like jump through the whole manuscript to make sure that the limitation was still there.
Mhm.
And so that works. It's like I just have like this little list of things that I write down and then immediately check off for that feeling of satisfaction. And then when I go back to like, what did I do while I edited? It's a long list of stuff that I can feel good about.
I really like that approach. I remember when I was in high school, I would always be like writing my like after school what I'm gonna like write today list like near the end of the day. And one time, one of my teachers saw me and she was like, "Have you ever considered writing a done list?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Of all the things you did that day." Which is like actually so great, especially for ADHD, because so often, I mean, it happens to everyone, but it happens like tenfold to us folks with ADHD. You end up doing like 6 side quests, and sometimes you don't get the thing you intended to do done. So, like, writing out what you actually ended up doing instead reminds you that, like, yes, it was a productive day, even if it didn't go according to plan. And, like, having that for editing too, like, a specific system for editing is so great because oftentimes when you're in the process of editing, you'll be like, I need to do chapter 17 today. But then when you're working on chapter 17, you'll be like, oh, there's this thing that like I need to check all the other chapters for continuity. And if I don't do it now, I'm going to forget. And yeah, so I think that's a great system. Vanessa, what's your system for tracking editing process or
A
progress?
bunch. It depends, which is my answer for a lot of things. It depends. What do I need right now? And sometimes I use TrackBear and I will track by pages. And sometimes I will track by time spent. It depends on what I'm doing. Right now, I am editing this novella nobody's ever going to read, and I'm just going by pages done. I do have, so it's not a bullet journal, but it is like, you go to the store and you buy all those fancy notebooks and you don't know what you're going to do with them. I use them as a to done list, and someone's called them a to-da list. So it's what you did, and I will just track everything I did in a day. I took out the garbage, I walked the dogs, I had my treadmill time, I finished this book, I edited this much, and I put it all in there, and I'm filling these up, and it's great. I have all these pretty, the pretty notebooks that you don't want to waste by writing things in them. Well, this is what I use them for. They're my ta-da notebooks. And yeah, it just depends on what's going to work best. Sometimes when I'm doing a lot of thinky things, I will track how much time I'm just sitting there staring at the wall, because that's part of the process. And that's hard to quantify when you have to do a lot of thinky bits. Oh, I only wrote 1 page today, but I thought about it for 4 hours. That's work, and you did a lot of work. Even if it was all up in here, you still did it. So those are some of the things that I use. TrackBear is great. I use it for word count too when I'm drafting. If I feel like, sometimes I don't care, but if I'm like, no, I need to see that I did something. I want that graph going up. I will use TrackBear.
Awesome. Chelsea?
Well, I don't have a to-do list. This is my first time hearing about it because I'm like, I usually use like Notion. That's where like my story Bibles and stuff is. That's just like my program of choice. And so I'll have like a list, usually as I'm drafting, of like, oh, like in chapter 16, I need to go back and make sure that this conversation that they're referencing that I'm moving from this chapter is actually here. Right. So, and when you check things off on Notion, it stays there, it doesn't disappear. And so I can just see it crossed off. And there's something extremely satisfying about seeing it scratched through. Right. So keeping track of it that way. But also, one of the big things that I do is kind of what I mentioned earlier is moving it to a different program. So even though I draft and dabble when I'm going through my editing, I move things over one chapter at a time, sometimes one scene at a time. And basically, I rebuild my novel in a different program. So my completion is seeing it come together. So I'm like, oh, I only got through one chapter, which is usually like the goal is to get through one chapter a day. But sometimes it's just like, oh, I spent a bunch of time on the scene because this part needs to be rewritten, yada, yada, yada. But it's also like I can see the word count versus each other in real time. So like if Dad will be like, oh, well, this scene was originally, or this chapter was originally 3,000 words. And then I can look at it in like ellipsis or Microsoft Word and be like, okay, well, now it's like 5,000 words. And I'm like, okay, that's the difference. Right. And for context, I write really long chapters. So that's perfectly normal for me. So just throwing that out there. But,
It's almost
so yeah,
editing
just
via transcription.
basically, yeah, because I have to get very minute with it because I will absolutely succumb to the jumping around like, oh, I need to go ahead and I'm working on chapter 3. Oh, this becomes relevant. I should add a breadcrumb to this so that in chapter 10 that's when it comes full circle, and then I'll jump straight to chapter 10 and I'm like, yeah, no. So I have to put it in a different document. So I'm like, focus on the thing ahead of me and then just write a to-do list in Notion to come back to the thing in chapter 10 later on. Otherwise, I will get so sidetracked and so unfocused. And I've learned from experience that if I do, what'll end up happening is I'll have an idea of the things that I want to like change and modify and work on, but I'm jumping around so much that I inevitably miss some things because I think I've already done it because that was the goal for the day and I felt accomplished. I was like, yeah, I got that done. I was like, wait a second. Kind of like you said, Diana, I did like 6 side quests. That got done, but the one thing that was the goal, still out there in the ether.
Basically, I use my book map to track everything. So I'm watching different columns appear. What usually gets done in the book map is a lot of highlighting. Like I'm looking at rearranging these scenes, I'll highlight them in a specific color. If I want to track continuity, I'll start highlighting certain things that I need to either add or make sure that they're tracking that one thing. I'll put a column in for that as I'm doing like editing in the actual document. So I use my book map to trap all of that. So it changes. So like some days it'll be full of highlights. It'll expand in columns. I'll add or subtract different things. And like I even have different colors for like this is done. Don't touch this anymore. And like we're working with this purple over here. So I kind of use that because then it's all in one place and I can't lose it. I usually have piles of sticky notes everywhere that migrate towards getting added as notes in there eventually if they're important enough.
Fair enough. That sounds good to me. All right. The next audience question is from Jocelyn. Approaching world building, how do you handle it when you need to change major world building elements after getting far into the work? And we'll start with Chelsea this time.
Give up, run away. But no, on a serious note, I think it depends on the aspect of world building, right? And I think this is one of those things that you only do that if you absolutely really have to, because a lot of the times, at least the way that I think, take it with a grain of salt, right? A lot of times, if you're writing fantasy and you do have like a magic system, right? Your magic system should be so ingrained to your character and your writing that changing it that should alter the entire story. So, depending on how big you're talking, you might be looking at writing a different story separate from what you've created, right? But if you are like, okay, well, I like the magic system, but we're going to change it from, say, like an elemental magic system to like, oh, there are like more niche types of magic, right? Then I would say the goal is to kind of identify the points in your story where you've established how the magic system work, and then know what it is that you're trying to change, why you're trying to change it, like what aspect of your character art or your plot is going to be affected by this change. And then kind of take it bit by bit, chapter by chapter, and be like, okay, this is where the magic is introduced. This is where the reader starts to understand the significance of it. This is where the characters start to really interact with it. This is where this needs to be changed, modified, rewritten so that it's not A anymore, it's B, right? Um, Changing world building is a really heavy lift. So I would say that I'm not gonna say it's not an editing thing because like everything comes down to rewriting, right? But I would definitely say put that's one of the things you think about heavily in the beginning before you start putting words on page. Because changing a character is a lot easier than changing the fundamental system that your world has been built on.
Would definitely agree with all of that. That's great advice. Jade, you look eager to add to this.
Oh, sorry. Can I repeat the question?
How do you approach dealing with world building changes that happen when you're pretty far into the story? Like when you've done quite a lot, how do you approach
Yeah.
building those
Okay.
in?
I would agree. You definitely want to think about that as much as you can before you've done a large chunk of writing. And if you are trying to change something, is it functionality? Is it visual? How much that will affect how much scene you actually have to change and which parts? Like, are we changing how the character is thinking about it and how they can use it? Or are we changing like the rituals they have to do, the words they have to use, what it looks like in action? And how much is that affecting, the overall plot goals and motivations and how these things come together, particularly if you've got more than one character. If it tracks and like, yes, I need to change this, it's going to make the book better. Because sometimes that happens. Sometimes you're like, oh, you get to the end and you're like, wow, it would be so much better if I just changed this one massive thing. And at that point, you are almost looking at a full rewrite. So at that point, it might be useful to kind of move to a transcription type of thing where you're looking at every scene so that you don't miss anything, because it will be fundamentally like integrated to your story, or it should be.
Yeah, very well said. CL?
When I saw the question, I was like, okay, how big are we talking? Because some things, like usually when I do world building, my approach is that the very first things I think of are load bearing. I cannot change them. If I change them, the story, like, it's done. I have to like basically throw everything that I've done so far in the island of misfit worlds and start over. Because if I was like, okay, well, I'm ready to midnight bargain, and I'm like, I have to change the world building element where the women who are married in bargaining season do not actually have their magic controlled. That is the whole story gone. It's done. It's eliminated. I am no longer writing the story. I have to come up with something completely different. Um, like there are some pillars that you cannot knock out unless you're like, I have to you throw the whole thing and start over. So then it started me wondering, is like, is the world building idea you're on, is it that important that you change it? Like, you can have a good reason to change a world building pillar that is load bearing. And if you feel like you have to change it because of those very good reasons, please do it. If you notice something that is like a foundational flaw in your story, and the only way you can, and it's because of this one thing, please change it. But understand that you are throwing what you've written away to start all over again with a different approach. And that maybe a lot of the stuff that you wrote isn't going to go there anymore, but that is okay. If that particular pillar of world building is such a huge problem, please change it.
Yeah, absolutely. It sucks to have to throw out, 20, 30 plus thousand words that you've
1.5
already written,
million
but
words.
sometimes
1.5 million words.
oh, it's a terrible feeling, but sometimes it is the right decision to make so that you can actually write something you're going to be proud of and have a story you're going to be proud of.
It is
Vanessa,
worth it.
anything to add to that?
Yeah, so it depends. Like C said, if you're changing something foundational, you really have to think about this. Is it going to be worth it? And if it is, yeah, you're looking at a full rewrite. And if it's something smaller, then fine, change it. And you're looking at multiple passes of going through and making sure that everything you've already written, this is in and it's fitting correctly. And I have done both. I don't know how many words I have thrown away and started again on this trilogy nobody will ever read. But it was the first thing I ever wrote as a child. I was like 11 when I started it. I'm almost 45 and I'm still writing this thing. And every now and then I would be, you level up as a writer and I'm like, I'm going to rewrite this thing. And it's actually, I think it was a lot of fun because when you've got this idea that will make it better, you see your story coming to life in that new way that you have envisioned. And like if you're pulling out a big world building thing and changing it, I would hope that you've thought about it really well and that you can see how much better this is going to make the story. And then when you're doing the rewrites, that becomes a reality. It's really exciting. Maybe I'm a weirdo, I don't know, but I actually kind of love rewriting things because then you get to see the story really coming to life. And like I think it was C earlier mentioned that you there's so much refinement and going on in the editing and rewriting process. You have your draft and that's great, but your work really starts to shine in the editing stages. And this is one of the ways that it can is by doing a full rewrite. It's a lot of work, but if you're really committed to this change, it's worth it too.
Well said. All right, so we are now at time. We do have one singular audience question left. Do folks want to stick around for an extra 5-10 minutes, answer that audience question, and then we'll wrap out? All
Yeah, of
right.
course.
So this final audience question from Imani is starting off writing a series as a newbie a bad idea? And
Huh. Ooh. Can I please
Can I
take
go?
this one?
Jay, go ahead.
So I have tossed away 1.5 million words at least. And I started writing this series when I was 12. It is 7 books long. It started as a trilogy. I've been writing it since I was 12. I will say it can be one of the most rewarding things you can do, but it is definitely an undertaking. It's effectively like, oh, I've decided to learn a language, but instead of learning like French or some established structural language, I'm going to learn like Hungarian or Mandarin. It's like you have chosen the most difficult project for yourself, depending on genre. I will say I picked epic fantasy, and that's like, yeah, I picked not only the hard thing, but the hardest thing of the hard things. So it's definitely more of a challenge. It can be far more rewarding. It will almost certainly take you a little longer. But it really depends on like, is this what you want to write? And if it is, then do it.
Chelsea?
Can I go next? Okay. I get asked this question a lot because, similar to Jade, I didn't mention it earlier, but I do offer like coaching services for indie authors. And one of the things that I get a lot is I have a series and it's going to be 3 to 5 books. And I'm so excited. The first book is ready. I'm ready to put it out in the world. What do I do? And I'm like, have you written the second book? Because if you have not written the second book and this is your very first time, write the second book first. Write the second book first. See if, because there are a couple of pitfalls that I find that new authors fall into is that one, and you feel like you have the idea for a series, and in your mind, in your heart of hearts, you're like, it's 2 books, it's 3 books, it's 5 books, it's 7 books, and it needs all of those books. And then you write the first one and you're excited about it, but then it's time to write the second book and you have no idea what's supposed to happen. You have no idea how the story is supposed to carry. You have no idea where you want to go and what you really want to do with it. The story itself is just big because you had never done it before. And that's okay, that's normal. But when you publish the first book before we're writing the second one, and now you have this very open-ended first book that needs a conclusion, and then you realize you didn't need a second book, you just needed an editor to help tighten up the first book to make it a standalone to wrap up the story, right? That's the first pitfall. The second pitfall is you genuinely have a series that you're excited about, but then it's your first book. I'm speaking from experience. You will want to write other things. You're going to have other adventures. You're going to meet new author friends. You're going to get invited to an anthology. You're going to come across this really cool project that you want to submit to. You're going to come across the advice like, hey, you should have more than one book in your backlog so that when people get into your series, they have other stuff to read. You're going to want to write a novella. You're going to want to do other things, especially if you're seriously talking about being a career writer. And then you're going to come back to, I have a series that I have not finished. And what happens, especially when you're new, is your writing grows exponentially when you start doing it consistently and you start learning and you start growing. And then your writing in that year or 2 years that you take off doing other things and doing side quests, now the writing no longer matches that first book that you wrote when you were like straight out the gate, right? And then you're faced with, oh, do I like republish the first book or do I keep going or like what do I do? Right. And then also, um, it comes to like, I know we're not, this isn't like a marketing panel, but also marketing. It's very hard to market a series as a debut author because you don't have a fan base and you're not necessarily pitching a whole story. You're pitching, potential in a story. And that's a very hard thing to do versus, hey, here's a standalone or here's a novella or here's something that's complete. Check this out. Now that you're here and you're invested, let me do something else. All that to say, I get very passionate about this. I would say if you're a newbie and you're thinking about it and you can say no, no. If you're like committed to it and you're just like, yes, I would say write the second book or before you make an ultimate decision to make sure that you're good and make sure that you can stay excited about it. Because another thing that happens a lot is people outgrow their series because they find other things to love. And then it's been 3 years or it's been 5 years, and your readers who locked in with you from day one, they're still waiting on an ending. It's kind of like that feeling, when you was on Wattpad or AO3, and then like your favorite writer just disappeared into the ether, and you're like, what happened? Why? You don't want to do that to your fans. That was a rant. I'm so sorry. I just get passionate about that.
No, that was absolutely great. And pretty much everything I would have said as well. Vanessa, Ciel, any quick notes to add?
I want to talk about this from a trade publishing standpoint because that's where I live. Um, if you were going to go into trad publishing and the very first thing you want to start with was a series, the wisdom has always been, baby, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why. Nobody knows who you are.
Yeah.
You have your debut, and the thing is that they're going to pick you out a pretty outfit and they're going to try and show you off as a brand new author full of promise and potential from the beginning, right? But nobody knows who you are. And the thing is that, like, while I get the idea that an indie book series are very successful because the kinds of readers who want that long series that they can go in will gravitate naturally to indie publishing. So it would be different
Mhm.
in that situation. But if you're in trad, nobody knows who you are. And nobody knows that you wrote that book. I still have people coming to me years after completing the Kingston cycle, which was like my very first book turned into a 3-book trilogy, who had no idea that there was a third book. Every once in a while, I run into people who don't even know that Witchmark had a sequel because nobody knows who you are. So there are people out there who read Witchmark and then thought I disappeared off the face of the earth until the fall of 2020 when I wrote The Midnight Bargain. They never caught those other 2 books. They did not know that they existed. They have since gone back, but that is a very real thing that can happen to you. And if you do not have the hard number sales, that is going to wreck your career really quickly. But you can start with a book that you intend to be part of a series if you just do a couple of things. Leave some unanswered questions, have a satisfying conclusion, and then go write something else. And then when your numbers are good on that, you can make a decision. Is it time to reveal that this is actually a series? Or, I think it's time for me to write another book in this world because I had a lot of success with it. The numbers are good and people keep asking me. And this is all very pragmatic, mercenary, money only decisions because art for money means sometimes you have to think about the money.
That specific reason is actually why when you're editing, first of a series is standalone, it's really not that different. The only difference is those extra add-ons because it needs to be solid on its own or you will never get the sale for the rest of the series.
Yeah. Yeah. But like if you're writing a series and you're doing it indie and you're gonna send it straight into the eyeballs of people who long for the day when they could go into the old A bookstore and like go to say the fantasy section and go, what is the fattest book on this shelf? That one. I'll take it. And then you find out that it's a series called The Wheel of Time, and there are 6 more just like it waiting for you. And then your eyes light up and you're like, ah. I love the Wheel of Time series. It's my perfect example of this. But if you're writing for that person and like your debut is a series, absolutely write your book, but also like make sure that your series Bible is like completely on point and have a series outline, have a long arc series outline, treat it like a season of television where
Yeah.
it's like basically I have this like say you have a 9-book series and you're like, well, I can divide this down into 3-book arcs and call them seasons of television. So season 1 has this resolution and it also kind of widens the difficulties for like the next season kind of idea. Think about the structure of the series you want to write as a whole and plan out your big marks really quite deliberately and then see how much stuff you can fill in with oh yeah, and I'm really excited to get into this, and like just keep working on your series Bible as much as you can in order to get that stuff in there. You'll thank yourself later because it will really help you when you're in book 4 and you're really in a jam to have like this big plan that you can look at it and be like, this is the vision, and then you can work according to the vision that you already set out for yourself. But yeah, in trad, baby, don't do it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too, because it's like you're mentioning all the systems, and I think why I always say be careful with that is because when you're a newbie, the systems that you need in place to like plan everything out and have the story Bible and to kind of know the pitfalls that are awaiting for you and having those in place, when you're brand new to it, you're usually experimenting, you're finding things out, and you're learning a lot of things really fast in real time. And it can be difficult, especially if you do have 4 book, 9 book series lined up and you figure something out in the second book that you probably should have figured out in the first book, but now you have to write the third one, you know?
Absolutely.
This is why it's taken me 12 years.
Vanessa, anything to add to that?
All of this, but I would recommend possibly writing even more than the second book. Write as many of the books as you can. If you're doing indie, there's nobody leaning over you saying, you must publish book 1 now. If you can write your whole damn series, write your whole damn series before you publish anything. And then you can go back if you get to book 4 and you're like, oh shit, this needs to happen, but it's not set up in the rest of the books. Well, they're published. Too bad. So if you don't have them published right away, or at least get all your first drafts. Don't polish it, just get your first drafts. Or if you're a planner, get really detailed outlines for all of the books so that you can look at it and plan it and know if you're going to need to, this thing happens in book 4, I need to stick something in book 2 so that it makes sense to set it up. You have a lot of setups that happen in your earlier books, and if you can, just write them all. um, because you will learn and you will grow, and you'll get to book 4 and you'll look at book 1 and you'll be like, oh my God, and give yourself the opportunity to go back and fix book 1. I published book 1 and then wrote the rest, and book 1 does not match the rest of the series, and it's really hurting my series. And there's not like, yeah, indie published, I could go back and like redo it, but I don't even really know how. It would be a completely different book at this point. So if you want to have a good time, you can read my series and you can watch me grow as an author from book to book. And some of my readers have said, wow, yeah, I can see you leveling up each one, which is kind of nice, but it would have been nice if I had learned a lot more before I published that first book. So if you can, write them and level them up, level up as you write, go back and fix before you publish.
Yeah, that is absolutely great advice. All right, thank you so much, everyone. This has been really great. So we have hit time. We've actually gone overtime. Thanks to everyone who has stuck around. We are just going to do one final round now. I want you to repeat your name, let us know where folks can find you, and just give your, like, if you could only give an author, someone who's starting this journey, one piece of advice about revisions, what would that advice be? And let's start with Jade this time.
I'm Jade. You can find me at eclipsewordsmithing.com or on Facebook or Instagram. Uh, for a piece of advice, honestly, find really good critique/professional partners to work with. The things you can learn from an editor, especially if you are new, are insurmountable. And the things you can use from experienced critique partners can only help you grow. Like, learn as much as you can and never stop.
Awesome. Vanessa?
Hello, Vanessa Ricci Thode. You can find me on Blue Sky, vricithode.bluesky.social, and my website, which they dropped in the chat, thodestool.ca, where you can sign up for my newsletter, find out all about my books and whatever. My one piece of advice would be, if you're not on deadline, take your time. Do it right. Your
Awesome.
process.
Great advice. Chelsea?
Okay. Hi. I'm Chelsea, better known as CM Lockhart. And you can find me on socials at C Lockhart Write, WRITE. And also at my website, writtenandmelanin.com. And my piece of advice would be um, find your process, learn how to love it because you spend a lot of your time in this process, and don't be afraid to change your process if as you grow, as you learn, and as you find things that work for you, things that don't work for you, because you might start out as a planner, you might turn into a pantser or vice versa, or new information comes across, just be open to things changing. Even if something worked for you in the past, it might not be what continues to work for you in the future, and that's okay. And also keep in mind that all of us are making this up as we go along. We just have more experience making it up, so it looks a little smoother.
Well
So,
said. CL?
I know a lot of people say that they love drafting, but they hate editing. I really, 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 really want you to love editing. I really want you to love revision. I really want you to see this as the place where you take the rough line sketch that you did as a first draft, and this is where you get to make it art, because that's how it works for me anyway. Um, Revision is where you make it great, and it's fun. It really is fun.
Awesome. And where can people find you?
clpolk.com.
All right. Thank you so much. And I am Diana Gunn. I run Weeknight Writers. We have a whole bunch of community support you can check out in our premium Discord. We are actually doing a bunch of editing stuff in the next couple of months to really help folks who are revising, especially for the first time. So go check that out if you're not already a member. We do great stuff. We get a lot of stuff done and we have a lot of fun. And I hope to see you all there. And yeah, and also again, shout out to Monique, who has been helping us with the chat and a bunch of other stuff on the back end of Weeknight Writers. It's so great to have help, and we are going to take this community to the next level in 2026. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day.